pages. During his middle school years, however, he did not have the luxury of this explanation for his differences and gradually retreated into a personal space inside his own head, where he was comfortable. At that time, there was little anyone could say or do to convince him that the outside world was any better. Finally, when he was 14, Blaise was accepted into a school that would end up changing his life in a very positive way. The Surrey School, which he writes about with such fondness in these pages, is a very small, very special school, and I mean special in a good way here, whose student population just hasn't been able to thrive in public school for a number of different reasons. Not everyone wanted to be there. There were students who felt that being in a special school made them into outcasts, or who weren't comfortable in such a small school where there were always eyes watching what they were up to. But many more students were like Blaise, hungry for a place where they were accepted for who they were and allowed to learn in an environment that encouraged them to achieve and grow. Almost immediately, Blaise started coming out of his protective shell and interacting with other people, students, teachers, counselors, in a meaningful way. Instead of just shutting down when someone asked him a question or called him on weird behavior, he was forced, gently of course, to actually respond, to share his thoughts and feelings, and to take responsibility for his actions. For the first time in his life, he was forming relationships with people who weren't his own family members. He was inside a social circle instead of wandering around the periphery looking in. At around the same time, Blaise started writing in earnest. He'd always enjoyed making lists, writing songs, and jotting down stories, but now he was starting to write about himself and what was going on around him. I'd always encouraged him to do this, so he was never shy about showing me what he'd written or asking me for feedback on what I read. Now, I know there is no way I can ever be completely objective about Blaise, but after a lifetime of reading, writing, and reviewing all kinds of books, I do have a good sense of what is quality writing. So when Blaise showed me some very early drafts of what would later become episodes, I knew immediately that it was something special. And again, I mean special in a good way. Blaise had struck intuitively on a concept for filtering his thoughts, feelings, and the events in his life that seemed so clever and clear, and yet I would never have thought of it even if I tried for years. All of our basic human stories are essentially the same, and so the challenge for any writer is to wrap them up and present those stories in a way that is somehow different enough to be interesting, but familiar enough to be relatable. Many of the events and experiences in Blaise's life were much like anyone else his age. The desire for friends, crushes on girls, struggles with schoolwork, getting a first job, and family gatherings. How he saw and understood all of these events, though, was unusual, and this harkened back to that original yellow wire problem, that different way Blaise had of seeing and processing the world around him, and his inability to communicate that vision to anyone else. But with episodes, Blaise had found a way to do just that. In this book, Blaise has taken some of the most important events in his life and made them into TV series in which he is a recurring actor. Some of these events, his crush on Hillary Duff, for example, have a limited run and are canceled after 2 or 3 seasons, not to be revisited, except, perhaps, in the YouTube of his memory. Some, like family gatherings at Thanksgiving, are a continuing series of specials and can be counted on to continue airing. Some, like his friendship with 2 close buddies, have stopped their production of original series but will live forever in syndication, fondly remembered and often revisited. Like all of us, Blaise has favorite episodes in his life and some that he wishes he could forget. Within those episodes, he remembers quotes that define the mood and different soundtracks that play during the scenes. To an extent, I believe this is something we all do. We're all the stars of our own shows. Our lives have permanent cast members and those who provide critical guest starring roles. Many of the events that define us, the show series in our lives, wind up in permanent syndication where we view them